was 3 months before my wedding, and I had just finished picking up my grandmother's wedding dress from the preservation shop where it had been stored for 45 years, a delicate ivory gown with hand-sewn lace and tiny pearl buttons that had been passed down through 3 generations of women in my family. My grandmother had worn it in 1965. My mother had worn it in 1985. And now it was my turn to wear it on the most important day of my life, a tradition that had been carefully preserved for decades and meant more to me than any expensive designer gown could ever mean. I'd spent weeks planning how I would alter it slightly to fit my modern style while keeping all the original details intact. And I had already booked appointments with a seamstress who specialized in vintage wedding dresses because I wanted everything to be perfect. Absolutely perfect. For the day I would finally marry the man I loved. I brought the dress home, carefully hung it in my childhood closet at my parents' house where it would be safe until the wedding, and I showed it to my mother and my younger sister Emily, both of whom gasped at how beautiful it still looked after all those years. My mother teared up and said, "This dress has been in our family for generations, and I am so proud that you're going to be the one to wear it next. It's a tradition that means so much to all of us." Emily didn't say much, just nodded and smiled, but I noticed something in her eyes that I didn't quite understand. At the time, a flicker of jealousy, perhaps, or resentment, or something darker that I couldn't quite place, because we had always been close, always been sisters who supported each other through everything. A month went by, and I was busy with wedding planning, dress fittings, and the chaos that comes with organizing a large celebration, so I didn't check on the dress as often as I should have because I trusted my mother to keep it safe, trusted my sister to respect my belongings, and trusted that my family would never do anything to sabotage the happiest moment of my life. But then, just 2 weeks before my wedding, I walked into my parents' house to pick up the dress for my final fitting. And when I opened the closet door where I had carefully hung it, I felt my heart stop because the dress was gone. Completely gone, replaced by an empty hanger and a note that read, "Sarah, I borrowed the dress for Emily's engagement photos. She looked so beautiful in it. Hope you don't mind. Love, Mom." I stared at that note for what felt like hours, my hands trembling, my vision blurring with tears, because I knew immediately that this wasn't just about borrowing the dress for a few photos. This was about my mother giving away something that wasn't hers to give, something that had been promised to me, something that was supposed to be mine on my wedding day. I called my mother's phone, and when she answered, I said through clenched teeth, "Where is my wedding dress? Why did you let Emily wear it without asking me?" My mother laughed nervously and said, "Oh, sweetheart, don't be so dramatic. Emily just wanted to try it on for her engagement photos. She looked so beautiful in it, and she's been going through such a difficult time with her fiancé, so I thought it would cheer her up. You can wear it for your wedding? Of course. I'll bring it back tomorrow." I felt something cold settle in my chest because I knew my mother was lying, knew that she had already made up her mind about what she was going to do, and no amount of arguing was going to change that. The next day, my mother brought the dress back to my apartment, and when I opened the bag to inspect it, I felt my heart shatter into a million pieces because the dress was ruined. There was a large tear in the lace along the bodice, the pearl buttons were missing, and there was a red wine stain across the front that looked like it had been there for days without anyone trying to clean it. I looked at my mother with tears streaming down my face and said, "What happened to my grandmother's dress? You promised me you would take care of it. This is my wedding dress. This is our family tradition. And you destroyed it." My mother shrugged and said, "These things happen, Sarah. It's just a dress. You can buy a new one. Emily is getting married next year, and she really needs something special to wear for her wedding. You can just buy something from a store. It's not that big of a deal." I stood there in my apartment, holding my grandmother's ruined dress, and I felt something inside me shift, something fundamental and permanent, because I realized in that moment that my mother had never intended for me to wear that dress at all. She had always planned to give it to Emily, and she had deliberately destroyed it so that I would have no choice but to give up and let Emily have it. Didn't argue with my mother. I didn't scream or cry or beg or plead. I just smiled, a cold, thin smile that made her take a step backward. And I said, "You're right, Mother. It's just a dress. I'll take care of it." And then I took the ruined dress, gently folded it, and placed it back in its preservation box without another word because I was already planning my revenge, already thinking about what I was going to do. And I knew that the best way to get back at someone who had betrayed you was to let them think they had won while you quietly built your counterattack. I spent the next week researching the best vintage dress restoration specialists in the country, eventually finding a woman in New York City who had been restoring antique wedding dresses for over 40 years and had worked on dresses twice as damaged as mine. I shipped my grandmother's dress to her with a note explaining what had happened, and I paid her an enormous amount of money to fix every single tear, replace every missing pearl, and remove every stain as if the damage had never occurred. It took 2 weeks of intensive work, but when the dress came back to me, it looked even more beautiful than it had before. The lace had been repaired so perfectly that you couldn't even tell where the tear had been. The pearls had been replaced with matching vintage buttons that looked identical to the originals, and the wine stain had vanished completely as if it had never existed. I put the dress back in its preservation box, hid it in a secure location that no one in my family knew about, and waited for the perfect moment to reveal my secret. The day of my sister's wedding, the day she would be wearing a cheap replica that my mother had bought from a department store because she was too arrogant to realize that I had already taken back what was rightfully mine. My sister's wedding day arrived a year later, and I was there with a smile on my face, wearing the most elegant dress I could find that wasn't my grandmother's gown because I was saving that for the perfect moment. My mother was bustling around, fussing over Emily, making sure everything was perfect, and she kept shooting me smug glances because she had assumed that I had given up on the wedding dress tradition entirely and had simply moved on with my life. I watched Emily walk down the aisle in the cheap replica dress that my mother had bought her, and I smiled because I knew what was coming next, knew that the moment was almost here, and I'd been waiting for an entire year to see the look on their faces when they realized what I had done. After the ceremony, during the reception, I stood up to make a toast, just like I'd been asked to do by my mother, and I raised my glass to Emily and her new husband with a warm smile on my face. I said, "Emily, I'm so happy for you. You look beautiful today. And I want to give you a wedding gift, something that I think you'll really appreciate." My mother smiled smugly, assuming I bought Emily some jewelry or a check, but then I reached under my chair and pulled out the preservation box that contained my grandmother's wedding dress, the real one, the one that had been restored to perfection. I opened the box, lifted the dress high so that everyone in the room could see it, and said, "This is our grandmother's wedding dress. The one our mother gave you, the one she ruined, the one she tried to take away from me. But I had it restored, and I brought it here today to show everyone what a real family tradition looks like." My mother's face went completely white, and she screamed, "Sarah, what are you doing? Put that away. You're ruining everything." I smiled calmly and said, "I'm not ruining anything, Mother. I'm just showing everyone the truth. You gave away something that wasn't yours to give. You destroyed our grandmother's dress because you wanted Emily to have it instead of me. But I took it back, and I'm keeping it because it was never yours to give away in the first place." The room went completely silent, all the guests staring at me, then at my mother, then at Emily, who had started crying because she realized that the dress she was wearing was a cheap replica while I held the real treasure in my hands. My mother rushed toward me, screaming and crying, trying to grab the dress, but I held it away from her and said, "You made your choice, Mother. You chose Emily over me. You destroyed something precious because you couldn't stand that I was the one who was supposed to wear it. But I fixed it. I saved it. And now it's mine forever." I carefully placed the dress back in its preservation box, walked out of the reception without looking back, and drove home with my grandmother's gown safely beside me because I was never going to let anyone take it away from me again. A few months later, I wore that dress for my own wedding, walking down the aisle in the same gown that my grandmother and mother had worn before me, and I felt a deep sense of peace because I had reclaimed something that had been stolen from me and made it my own again. My mother tried to apologize multiple times, leaving voicemails and sending letters, but I never responded because I had already given her enough of my life, enough of my trust and enough of my love, and she had thrown it all away because she couldn't see that both of her daughters were deserving of love and respect. Emily and I eventually reconciled, slowly and carefully, because she had been manipulated by our mother just as much as I had. And we both learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us are the ones who hurt us the most. I kept my grandmother's dress in a secure location after that, never letting anyone borrow it again. And every time I looked at it, I remembered the lesson I had learned, that you cannot trust people who don't respect your boundaries. And that's sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply take back what is rightfully yours and walk away from the people who tried to steal it from you. You cannot trust people who don't respect your boundaries. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply take back what is rightfully yours and walk away from the people who tried to steal it from you. Family tradition is sacred, but it only matters if the people who pass it down do so with love and respect, not manipulation and favoritism.